The act of writing it down was one of quiet desperation, a final surrender to a loneliness so profound it had started to feel like a physical part of me. For 2 years, the public library had been my sanctuary, and its head librarian, Elias, the unwitting object of my silent, hopeless adoration. He was, to my knowledge, completely and utterly straight. He had a steady, quiet confidence that seemed rooted in a life I couldn't imagine. A life of weekend barbecues and a girlfriend who smelled like vanilla and sunshine. A life utterly separate from my own quiet orbit of solitude. My life was a carefully curated collection of routines designed to minimize friction. Work, home, library. Repeat. The library was the only variable, the only place where the unexpected might brush against me. It was there, amidst the hushed reverence for the printed word, that I allowed myself the small, painful luxury of watching him. Elias. He was a man built of gentle contradictions, broad-shouldered and solid. Yet his hands, when he reshelved a book, were surprisingly graceful, his long fingers treating each spine with a delicate respect. He wore simple, well-worn sweaters and had a pair of reading glasses that were perpetually perched on the end of his nose. The faint, clean scent of laundry soap and old paper clung to him, a smell I had come to associate with a sense of calm I couldn't find anywhere else. I had constructed an entire personality for him from these meager observations. He was kind but firm with noisy teenagers, patient with the elderly patrons who struggled with the computers. He had a rare, slow smile that he reserved for moments of genuine amusement, a subtle crinkling at the corners of his deep-set eyes that made my chest ache. I told myself my fascination was academic, an anthropological study of the archetypal handsome, unavailable man. It was a lie, of course, a flimsy shield against the truth. I was in love with a ghost, a man I had never truly spoken to beyond the perfunctory hello and thank you at the checkout desk. The book was a slim volume of poetry by a poet no one read anymore. I checked it out half a dozen times, not for the words inside, but because it was esoteric enough that it often sat on the reshelving cart for a day or two before being put away. It felt like a safe vessel. That particular Tuesday, the rain was beating a mournful rhythm against the tall, arched windows of the reading room. The loneliness was a physical weight, pressing down on my sternum. I took a piece of paper from my journal, not a torn sheet, but a clean one, carefully removed. My pen hovered over it for a long time. I didn't write a name. I didn't address it to him. I just wrote. It was a confession, but not of love for a specific person. It was a confession of the feeling itself. I wrote about the ache of seeing beauty and having no one to share it with. I wrote about the hollowness of a quiet apartment, the feeling of being a spectator to the lives of others. I wrote about the paradoxical comfort of a place like this, surrounded by the silent company of 1,000 stories, yet feeling more alone than ever. The words were raw, unedited, a direct line from the most vulnerable part of my soul. I folded the paper twice and tucked it deep within the pages of the poetry book, near a verse about unspoken things. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was an anonymous message in a bottle, cast into a sea of paper and dust. A foolish, sentimental gesture. I slid the book into the return slot and walked out into the rain without looking back, feeling lighter and more terrified than I had in years. For a week, I couldn't bring myself to go back. The library, once my refuge, now felt like the scene of a crime. My crime of foolishness. What if a child found it? What if one of the elderly volunteers found it and was scandalized? What if he found it and, through some impossible leap of logic, knew it was me? The thought sent waves of hot shame through my body. I imagined his expression of confusion, then pity, or worse, disgust. The carefully constructed wall of anonymity I had built around myself would be shattered. My quiet, harmless crush would become a source of awkwardness and revulsion for him. But the pull of the place, the pull of him, was too strong. The following Wednesday, my resolve crumbled. I walked in with my shoulders hunched, my gaze fixed on the floor, my face hot. I pretended to browse the new fiction section, a corner of the library that gave me a clear, if distant, view of the main desk. Elias was there, leaning over a computer, the familiar glasses perched on his nose. The line of his jaw was tense with concentration. He looked exactly the same. The world had not ended. My secret had, it seemed, sunk without a trace. A sense of profound, Anticlimactic relief washed over me. Of course, it was just a piece of paper. It had probably fallen out, been swept up by the cleaning crew, and now sat at the bottom of a landfill. My grand, desperate gesture was nothing more than litter. The thought was both humiliating and immensely comforting. I could go back to my old routine. I could go back to watching him from a safe distance, my secret intact, my heart safely locked away. I spent an hour drifting through the stacks, the familiar scent of aging paper calming my frayed nerves. I ran my fingers over the spines, the quiet hum of the building a balm to my soul. Eventually, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress, I found my way to the poetry section. I scanned the shelves for the familiar slim volume. It wasn't there. My stomach tightened. It was probably still on the reshelving cart, or perhaps someone else had actually checked it out. Then I saw it. It was on a lower shelf, slightly out of place, as if it had been put back hastily. My breath caught in my throat. My hands felt clammy. This was stupid. I was being paranoid. I reached for it, my fingers trembling slightly. The book felt heavier than I remembered, weighted with significance. I carried it to a deserted corral in the back corner, my heart thudding a loud, frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat down, the worn wooden chair creaking under my weight. For a moment, I just stared at the cover. I was afraid to open it, afraid of what I would find, or what I wouldn't. Finally, I took a deep, shaky breath and opened the book to the middle. I flipped through the pages, my fingers searching for the folded note. It was gone. Just gone. Relief and a strange, sharp pang of disappointment warred within me. So that was it. It had been found and discarded. My secret was safe. I should have felt nothing but gratitude. But the disappointment was undeniable, a small, bitter pill. My message in a bottle had been found by someone who saw it only as trash. It was a fitting, pathetic end to a pathetic gesture. I was about to close the book when I saw it. A small, crisp white corner, peeking out from near the back. It was different from my own paper. Thicker, stiffer. It was a piece of library cardstock, the kind used for bookmarks or catalog notes. My blood ran cold. This was impossible. This couldn't be happening. With a hand that shook so badly I could barely control it, I pulled the paper out. It was a small rectangle, no bigger than a business card. On it, written in a sharp, surprisingly neat black ink, were 5 words. Meet me at closing. Time stopped. The low hum of the library faded into a dull roar in my ears. The words swam before my eyes, stark and irrefutable. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't a coincidence. The handwriting was unfamiliar, precise, and utterly confident. It could only be him. There was no other explanation. He had found my note. He had read it. And he had written back. My mind raced, a frantic spiral of panic and disbelief. Why? What could he possibly want? Was he going to fire me as a patron? Ban me from the library for being a creep? Was he going to confront me, to demand an explanation? Or maybe, and this thought was the most terrifying of all, maybe he was going to be kind. Maybe he was going to offer me a pamphlet for a support group, his eyes full of the gentle, devastating pity I had dreaded. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:15. The library closed at 9. 45 minutes. 45 minutes to decide whether to flee and never come back, or to face the man who held my fragile, secret heart in his hands. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to disappear back into my anonymous life and pretend this never happened. But the note felt like a dare, a challenge, and beneath the terror, a tiny, wild spark of hope flickered to life. He hadn't written, "Stop leaving weird notes in books." He hadn't written, "We need to talk." He had written an invitation. Meet me at closing. The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. I didn't move from the corral. I just sat there, staring at the note, turning it over and over in my trembling fingers. I watched the library slowly empty out. The students with their laptops packed up their bags. The elderly woman who always read the newspaper folded it carefully and shuffled towards the exit. The lights in the children's section went dark. Each departure felt like a tick of a clock counting down to my execution or my salvation. At 5 minutes to 9, a soft chime echoed through the building, followed by Elias's voice over the intercom. His voice was exactly as I had always heard it. Calm, steady, professional. Ladies and gentlemen, the library will be closing in 5 minutes. Please bring all materials to the front desk. The sound of it, so normal, and yet so loaded with new meaning, sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. This is it. I am standing up. My legs feel like they're made of concrete. I walk towards the front of the library, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous, near-empty space. The last few patrons are trickling out the door, offering quiet goodnights to Elias. He nods at them, his expression unreadable. He doesn't look at me. He's busy organizing a stack of books, his movements economical and precise. The heavy glass doors swing shut behind the last patron. The lock clicks into place, a sound of finality that makes my stomach clench. Just us. My heart picks up pace. He still hasn't looked at me. He just continues his work, the silence stretching between us, thick and heavy. I stand awkwardly by a display of new arrivals, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. I feel like a suspect in a police station waiting for an interrogation to begin. Maybe I should just say something. Apologize. Explain. But my throat is tight, the words trapped behind a wall of fear. He finishes with the books, stacking them perfectly. He takes off his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose for a moment, a gesture I've seen 100 times. It's a sign of weariness. When he finally lifts his head and his eyes meet mine, my breath catches. His gaze is direct, intense, and completely devoid of pity or anger. It's just watchful. Leo, he says. My name. He knows my name. Of course he does, it's on my library card. But hearing him say it, just the single word hanging in the silent air, feels shockingly intimate. Elias. I manage to reply, my voice a hoarse whisper. He gestures with his head towards the back offices. Walk with me. It isn't a request. I follow him like a sleepwalker, my feet barely making a sound on the worn linoleum. He leads me past the staff lounge and into a small, cramped office filled with towering stacks of books, boxes of supplies, and the overwhelming, comforting scent of paper and binding glue. It feels like the heart of the library, its secret, cluttered engine room. He doesn't turn on the main overhead light, instead flicking on a small desk lamp that casts a warm, golden glow over the room, leaving the corners in soft shadow. He doesn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he leans against it, crossing his arms over his chest. The posture is defensive, yet his face is open. He reaches into the pocket of his sweater and pulls out a folded piece of paper. My paper. He doesn't open it. He just holds it between his thumb and forefinger. Did you write this? He asks, his voice low and even. I can't lie. I can't pretend. The charade is over. I just nod, unable to meet his gaze. I stare at a frayed corner of a cardboard box, bracing myself for the impact of his next words. I thought so, he says, and the softness in his tone makes me finally look up. He's not looking at the note anymore. He's looking at me, and there's something in his eyes I've never seen before. Not the professional kindness of the librarian, but something deeper, something searching. It was honest, he says, the word landing gently in the quiet room. Brutally honest. I'm sorry. I blurt out, the words tumbling over themselves. I don't know why I did it. It was stupid. I never thought anyone would. I just needed to get it out. I can use a different library if you want. I won't bother you again. He lets out a soft, humorless huff of air. A faint smile touches his lips, but it doesn't reach his eyes. Leo, stop. I fall silent. He unfolds the note, his eyes scanning the words I know by heart. I watch his face, trying to decipher his expression in the dim light. I see the muscles in his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly as he reads. He's not just skimming. He's absorbing it. When he looks back up at me, his expression is serious, almost solemn. Do you feel this way often? He asks, his voice barely above a whisper. He taps a line in the note. The line about being a spectator. Like you're on the outside of everything, looking in. The question is so direct, so personal, it knocks the air out of my lungs. It's not the question I expected. It's not about my sexuality, or my crush, or my inappropriate use of library books. It's about the core of the note. The loneliness. He saw it. He saw me. I can only nod again, a lump forming in my throat. Yeah, he says, his gaze drifting away for a moment, towards the shadowed corners of the room. I know the feeling. That simple admission changes everything. It's a crack in the stoic facade, a glimpse of a landscape inside him that I never knew existed. The idea of this man, this steady, capable man, Ever feeling the same profound sense of isolation that plagued me was inconceivable. And yet, he had said it. He had built a bridge across the chasm of my fear with just 4 words. He refolds the note carefully, deliberately, and tucks it back into his pocket. Things aren't always what they seem, Leo. The silence that follows is different. It's not the tense, awkward silence of before. It's charged, humming with unspoken possibilities. The air feels thick, electric. He hasn't moved from his position, leaning against the desk, but the space between us feels smaller, more concentrated. Why did you write back? I asked, my voice small but clear. Why ask me to stay? He finally pushes himself off the desk. He takes a single, slow step towards me. My heart is a frantic drum against my ribs. He stops just an arm's length away. I can smell the faint scent of his soap, the clean, crisp smell of his sweater. It's intoxicating. Because, he says, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seems to vibrate through the floor. I've been watching you too. The world tilts on its axis. My carefully constructed reality, with its fixed points of his straightness and my invisibility, shatters into a million pieces. He's been watching me. The observer was being observed. The thought is terrifying and exhilarating. You what? I stammer, my brain struggling to process the information. A real smile finally breaks through his serious expression. It's the slow, crinkling smile I've admired from afar 100 times, but up close, it's devastating. It transforms his entire face, softening the harsh lines, making his eyes gleam in the lamplight. You're not very subtle, he says, a hint of teasing warmth in his voice. You stare. A lot. A hot blush floods my face. It's okay, he says, and his smile gentles. I didn't mind. He takes another step. He is so close now. So impossibly close. I have to tilt my head back slightly to look up at him. I can see the faint stubble on his jaw, the tiny flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I was hoping you'd come back for the book, he admits, his voice dropping even lower. I put it back on the shelf 3 days ago. I was starting to think you weren't going to. He was waiting. For me. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. The anxiety, the hope, the fear, it wasn't just on my side. He had been waiting, too. He had taken a risk, just as I had. I thought you were straight. I whisper, the words feeling foolish and small now. His smile fades, replaced by something more intense. Like I said, things aren't always what they seem. He lifts his hand, slowly, as if giving me time to retreat. I don't move. I can't. I am rooted to the spot, caught in the gravity of his presence. His fingers, warm and slightly rough, brush against my cheek. The touch is electric, a jolt of lightning that travels down my spine. He doesn't caress me, just rests his hand there, his thumb stroking softly just below my eye. Your note, he says, his voice thick with an emotion I can't name. It felt like reading a page out of my own journal from a long time ago. And that's when I break. The years of loneliness, of silent yearning, of feeling utterly and completely alone, it all comes rushing to the surface. A single tear escapes and traces a hot path down my cheek, right into his hand. Oh, Leo, he murmurs, his expression softening with a tenderness that undoes me completely. He doesn't wipe the tear away. He just holds it, holds my face, his gaze searching mine. I don't know who moves first. Maybe he leans down, maybe I rise up on my toes. It doesn't matter. The space between us dissolves, and his lips meet mine. It is not a kiss of passion or demand. It is a kiss of recognition. It's soft, tentative at first, a question. His lips are warm and firm, tasting faintly of coffee and something uniquely him. I respond with all the pent-up longing of the last 2 years, a silent confession that says everything my note could not. My hands, which had been clenched at my sides, come up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath his sweater. He deepens the kiss, a soft sigh escaping his lips. His other hand comes up to cradle the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair. It's a kiss that feels like an answer, like a destination. It's gentle and searching and so overwhelmingly right that it makes my knees feel weak. It is not rushed. It is honest. It is everything I never let myself dream of. When we finally break apart, we are both breathless. He rests his forehead against mine, our eyes closed. His thumb continues to stroke my cheek, a small, steady anchor in the dizzying storm of my emotions. The only sounds are our ragged breaths and the quiet hum of the building around us. I was so scared. I whisper into the small space between us. Me too, he confesses, his voice a low vibration against my skin. Scared you wouldn't show up tonight. He pulls back just enough to look at me, his eyes dark and serious in the lamplight. The playful teasing is gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that mirrors my own. He found my message in a bottle, and instead of discarding it, he had sailed his own ship out to find me. The moment stretches, perfect and fragile, but the real world intrudes. The spell is broken by the mundane reality that we are in his office, after hours. We can't stay here forever. A wave of awkwardness, the inevitable aftermath of such a momentous event, begins to creep in. What now? He seems to feel it too. He takes a small step back, his hands dropping from my face and hair, though one of them finds my wrist, his fingers wrapping loosely around it. The contact is grounding. It's late, he says, his voice returning to a more normal register, though it's still laced with a new warmth. I have to finish closing up, right? I say, my own voice sounding distant. The anxiety begins to prickle at the edges of my newfound joy. Was this just a moment? A beautiful, impossible aberration fueled by a lonely note and a quiet room? Tomorrow, would he be behind the counter, all professional distance, this night a secret we would never speak of again? The fear of the morning after, even when it was only moments after, was a familiar, bitter taste. He leads me out of the office, his hand still loosely on my wrist, a silent claim. He moves through the darkened library with practiced ease, turning off the final lights, his footsteps sure and steady. I follow, feeling like a ghost in my own dream. We reach the front doors, and he turns the lock. The cold night air rushes in as he pushes the door open. This is it, the end of the dream. We step outside onto the wet pavement, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows. The city sounds, muted inside the library, are suddenly loud and jarring. He turns to face me, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket now. The distance between us feels like a mile. Well, I start, my throat dry. Thank you for not calling security. The joke falls flat, landing with a pathetic thud in the space between us. He doesn't smile. He just looks at me, his expression unreadable again under the harsh orange glow of the street lamp. My heart sinks. It was a mistake. Pity. A moment of shared loneliness that meant nothing more. Leo, he says, his voice firm, cutting through my spiraling thoughts. He takes a step closer, closing half the distance between us. Don't what? Don't do that, he says softly. Don't retreat. Don't build the wall back up. I can see you doing it. His perception is unnerving. He can read me as easily as he reads the spine of a book. I don't know what this is, I admit, gesturing vaguely between us. I don't know what happens now. I don't either, he says honestly. But I'd like to find out. He hesitates for a second, then reaches out and takes my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. The gesture is simple, public, and breathtakingly bold. His hand is large and warm around mine. Tomorrow, he says, his gaze holding mine. Coffee. Before my shift. There's a place around the corner. It's not a question. It's a statement. A plan. A promise of continuation. Okay. I breathe, the word a puff of white in the cold air. Yeah. Okay. He holds my gaze for a moment longer, then gives my hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. Get home safe, Leo. He turns and walks away down the street, his silhouette disappearing into the dark. I stand there for a long time, my hand still tingling from the warmth of his, the single word tomorrow echoing in my mind. The entire next day was a war fought within the confines of my own skull. A part of me, the old, cautious, self-protective part, insisted it was a dream. I would show up for coffee, and he wouldn't be there. Or he would be there, and he would be polite and distant, and tell me that last night was a mistake. I spent hours dissecting every word, every gesture, searching for hidden meanings, for signs of insincerity. The test wasn't whether he would show up. The test was whether I could silence the voice of doubt long enough to allow myself to. But overriding the fear was the memory of his hand in mine, the memory of his forehead pressed against mine, the memory of his voice saying, I've been watching you too. I made the choice. I chose to be brave. I walked to the coffee shop with my heart in my throat. It was a small, unassuming place, warm and filled with the rich smell of roasted beans. I scanned the room, my stomach churning. And then I saw him. He was sitting at a small table in the back, a book open in front of him, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. He wasn't looking for me. He was just there, waiting. He looked up as if he sensed me, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was not the librarian's smile. It was not the sad, gentle smile from his office. This was new. It was a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners, and it was aimed directly at me. It was a smile that said, "Here you are." "Hey," he said as I reached the table, his voice a low, warm welcome. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the chair opposite him. The awkwardness I had dreaded was simply not there. The space between us felt easy, comfortable. We didn't talk about the night before. Not right away. We talked about the book he was reading. We talked about my job. We talked about the terrible coffee at my office and the surprisingly good pastries at this cafe. It was normal. It was simple. And it was the most intimate conversation I had ever had. With every mundane detail we shared, another brick in my wall of solitude came tumbling down. As we were getting ready to leave, he for his shift and me for my own office, he paused at the door. "I'm glad you came," he said, his expression serious again. "I'm glad you were here," I answered, the truth of it making my voice thick. We walked out into the bright morning. The world felt different, sharper, more vibrant. I was no longer just an observer, watching life through a pane of glass. I was in it. We walked in comfortable silence for a block, heading towards the library. As we neared the corner where we would have to part, his hand brushed against mine. It felt deliberate. I held my breath. He didn't hesitate. His fingers found mine, lacing through them, a mirror of the night before, but in the full, unforgiving light of day. It was a conscious choice, a public declaration, even if only to ourselves. I looked at our joined hands, then up at his face. He was already looking at me, a quiet, steady reassurance in his eyes. He didn't need to say anything. It was all there. For 2 years, I had come to this place seeking refuge from a world in which I felt invisible. I had sought solace in the silent company of books, all the while yearning for a connection I believed was impossible. I had cast a message of despair into the quietest of oceans, never expecting a reply. But he had found it. He had seen the loneliness behind the words because he recognized it as his own. And he had written back, not with pity, but with an invitation to step out from the shadows and be seen. Walking beside him, his hand warm and solid in mine, I felt the last vestiges of that old, aching loneliness finally begin to recede. It was replaced by a quiet, steady warmth, a feeling I hadn't realized I was searching for my whole life. It felt like I had come home.